When it comes to buying a custom pre-built gaming PC, it's pretty hard to figure out who you should actually buy your PC from. There's a lot of big names out there, just to name a few: Digital Storm, Main Gear, Build Redux, NZXT BLD. And when you're looking at those companies, of course, you're going to get the aesthetic of that company. But at the same time, it's hard to figure out who is offering the best price to performance. So in today's video, I wanted to take a look at a custom pre-built focused around the new NVIDIA RTX 4070 Ti and see which company offers the best deal. So we're going to start things off with Main Gear and specifically their newly introduced series of MG1 computers. And this pre-built just looks really, really good. It was designed in collaboration with Shroud, so you know it has this gamer aesthetic. It just has really clean lines, some nice subtle RGB hints, as well as super customizable front panel that you can pretty much customize however you want to make this PC just for you. And when it comes to that front panel, you might not be getting the most airflow through it, but it's going to be the super customized option that you might be looking for if you want to go with something that only you're going to have and nobody else is. And it starts pretty reasonably at around $1,400, but we're going to bump that price up with this RTX 4070 Ti build. So when we jump into the specs, we're looking at an i5-13600K for the CPU. So 20 threads of performance is pretty hard to beat when it comes to this build. And we're also going with a B660 motherboard that allows us to use some cheaper DDR4 memory, and we're going with 16 gigs of that at 3200 megahertz. And we're also cooling the CPU with a 280 millimeter included AIO. So we are all water cooling the CPU, which should boast for the performance as well. Of course, we're going with that RTX 4070 Ti, but we don't really know who the manufacturer of the card is going to be, at least when we customize it through the Main Gear portal. When it comes to the power supply, we're looking at an 850 watt power supply, which should be able to allow us to customize down the line, and also a 1 terabyte NVMe SSD for a lot of storage, a lot of super fast storage on that motherboard. And when it comes to the warranty, you're looking at lifetime labor included with this Main Gear build, as well as 1 year of parts replacement included. And you can also bump that warranty up all the way from 2 or 3 years, depending on what you're looking to pay for this build. But overall, the build comes out to right around $2,500. So it is a little bit higher when it comes to the price, but we'll see where the other competition lands. And that is where we're gonna jump into Build Redux. So Build Redux is a subsidiary of Digital Storm, really focusing on more of a entry-level to mid-level gaming PC introduction that allows you to really customize a build, but maybe not with all of the options that you might get from somebody like a Digital Storm. You're pretty much going to get the same case in every build, no matter what specs you put on the inside, but it does look really, really clean. They also have a partnership with Cooler Master that allows them to use their cases as well as a lot of their components on the inside of the case. Overall, this thing just looks really, really good. A lot of people have them, so they're definitely reputable. And they're also famed for only charging around $100 for building the PC for you, and everything else is just parts at the price of those parts. So we get into the build. Let's just jump through the specs. We're looking at an i5-13600KF, as well as a B660 motherboard, so very similar to our last Main Gear build, but we're not gonna get the integrated graphics with our CPU. We're also looking at a dual fan AIO, just like we saw with the Main Gear build, as well as 16 gigs of memory at 3200 megahertz, 1 terabyte NVMe SSD, and an 850 watt power supply. And of course, we got the 4070 Ti included because that's the whole purpose of these builds, is see what we can get with that 4070 Ti. And when it comes to the warranty, with any Build Redux build, you're getting 2 years of parts and labor included, which is a very, very nice addition when it comes to these builds. And if we just jumped into it to try to maybe customize it a little bit more to see what else we could actually get with this build, it actually is pretty customizable, and the prices aren't crazy. We could change that 13600K out for something like a 5800X, or even jump it up to a 13600K or a 13700K. And when it comes to the GPUs, they're also pretty reasonable when it comes to the upgrades as well. If you wanted to bump up to something like a 4080 or cut it down to something like a 3080. So overall, super customizable there from Build Redux, coming in at right around $2,200. And we would jump into NZXT BLD just to kind of give you an overall feel of what we're going for. We're really looking at like this Creator PC Pro in terms of a build that we would try to mimic. This thing does come with a 3070 Ti, which last generation is great, but the price of this thing is still pretty expensive, being that it is last generation components. So let's see what it would look like with something like that RTX 4070 Ti, what price we would have to spend. So we're going to spec this thing out with the H500 or the H510 Elite, really keeping the same aesthetic as that Creator PC. And this thing just looks great. I mean, the Elite just looks super, super clean, but you're not going to get the best airflow because of the glass front panel. Everything comes in through the side ventilation. NZXT does not offer a 13th gen processor from Intel, so we had to go with the 12600K. We're also looking at a Z690 motherboard with this build, so a bumped up Z690 motherboard that's going to allow us to overclock our CPU. Again, 16 gigs of RAM, 1 terabyte NVMe SSD, 850 watt power supply. The warranty with NZXT is also 2 years, parts and labor, just like Build Redux. And we're also going to go with a Z63 Kraken AIO from NZXT, so all NZXT components pretty much, and they look great. You're putting kind of the best of components in this build, and it's going to look the part, maybe not perform super well on the CPU side. And again, they don't have the most customization when it comes to both graphics cards or CPUs like we saw with Build Redux or Main Gear, but they are pretty competitive. And now we're going to go to Build Redux, kind of, I guess, brother or father in this case, with Digital Storm. And we're going to look at their Lynx build. And this thing, again, all these PCs look really good. It kind of just depends on what you're looking for specifically. But the Lynx build just looks really cool. You can do a lot of customization when it comes to Digital Storm, from custom water cooling, AIO cooling, air cooling, all the components you could possibly think of. And this is where we land. So we're looking at the Lynx PC with, again, an Intel i5 13600KF. So we do get the F-series processor like we did with Build Redux. We're also looking at a B660 motherboard. Again, 16 gigs of RAM, 1 terabyte NVMe SSD, the 280 mil cooler AIO for the CPU. Again, an RTX 4070 Ti in this build, because that's the whole point of this thing. 850 watt power supply. Overall, it's the exact same build as everything else, minus the NZXT one, where we saw a slightly different CPU and motherboard combination. But with this build, you're also getting 3 years of labor included in the warranty and 1 year of parts replacement included in this warranty, coming in at right around $2260, on sale $100, so maybe $2350. Overall, pretty much in the same ballpark as our other builds. Now, the only thing I didn't mention on the previous NZXT build is that we do know who makes that graphics card. It's going to be a Gigabyte card. With the rest of these builds, we don't really know who the manufacturer of our graphics card is going to be. Not really a big deal, but you might get slightly different performance depending on which manufacturer each of these builders is partnering with. So overall, I mean, all these PCs are extremely competitive and extremely similar when it comes to the components. The biggest thing is price. So you're going to get very similar build quality from all of these guys. You can check out build quality videos from all of these PC manufacturers and see what you're going to get. But from a comparison perspective, everything's pretty much the same. If there's no green or red highlighted in any of the rows, it's pretty much the exact same components as what you would see from each of the builds. Maybe slightly different manufacturers of RAM and storage, but still the same capacity, same speeds. The only real differences are on the CPU side. You get the 13600K from Main Gear, or we're getting a KF from Build Redux and Digital Storm. And we can only go with the 12600K with NZXT, but we are also pairing it with a Z690 motherboard versus the B660. So we get full overclocking capabilities on that board, whereas we don't with the other builds. That could also be a play into the decision of going with one of the NZXTs versus the other options out on the table. The other big thing is warranty differentiation. Build Redux and NZXT pretty much have the same warranty at 2 years for parts and labor. Main Gear kind of comes out of the blue with a lifetime labor and 1 year parts replacement, and then Digital Storm at that 3 year for the labor and 1 year for the parts replacement. The biggest differentiation is price. So it's $2,500 for the Main Gear, almost $200 more than our next best option. NZXT at $2,300-ish dollars there. And then we go Build Redux and Digital Storm at pretty much the most competitive pricing at $2,268 from Build Redux, which maybe doesn't have the cheapest entry-level builds, but as you slowly progress up in their lineup, they do get very, very affordable compared to the competition, as we can see here, and Digital Storm coming in at right around $2,260. So when it comes to the price point, I would kind of go between Digital Storm and Build Redux. You're getting very good components with those builds. pretty much the exact same components as every one of the other builds. You're not skimping out on anything. You're not missing anything. Maybe the 2-year parts and labor warranty from Build Redux puts it ahead of Digital Storm, maybe the other way around. Maybe you like the look of one of those builds better than the other. Overall, I mean, you can't go wrong with any of these builds. It really comes down to what you're looking for at the price point that you're wanting. You can even spec up some of those components that I threw in there as well. But overall, there's like a $200, $250 differentiation in price when it comes to these builds. So you're definitely saving some money if you go with something like the Build Redux or the Digital Storm. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Any questions or comments, leave those down below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.